Every single night, millions of American seniors follow the same comforting ritual. They finish their dinner, they take their medications, they brush their teeth, and then, somewhere between 8 and 10 o'clock, they pour themselves something to drink. Maybe it's a glass of orange juice because, after all, it has vitamins in it. Maybe it's a cold can of soda because the evening just feels empty without it. Maybe it's a warm mug of hot cocoa because it soothes them and helps them wind down. Or maybe, and this one is by far the most common, it's a glass of wine. Just one glass. Because they've heard their whole lives that a small glass of wine before bed is relaxing, that it helps you sleep, that it might even be good for your heart. And here's what nobody is telling these people, what nobody is putting clearly on the label or saying plainly enough in the doctor's office. Some of those bedtime drinks that feel completely harmless, drinks that feel like self-care, are working against your blood pressure while you sleep. Not while you're awake, not while you'd even notice. They are doing their damage during the most critical cardiovascular hours of the entire day. The hours when your heart is supposed to rest. The hours when your blood pressure is supposed to drop. The hours when the choices you made 3 hours earlier are still actively circulating through your bloodstream and shaping what your heart does while your eyes are closed. I'm Dr. Sandra Whitemore. I have been practicing cardiology for 23 years, and I need to tell you something that I genuinely wish more of my patients knew before they ever walked through my door. The morning blood pressure reading that shocks so many seniors, the number that comes back high even after medication, even after a reasonable night, even after doing everything else right, is often a direct, measurable consequence of what that person drank the evening before. Not what they ate, not their stress levels, not their exercise habits from that day. What they drank in the hours right before bed. Hit that subscribe button right now. This channel delivers honest, life-changing medical truth to you for free, every single week. Before we get into the list, I want you to understand something that is going to reframe everything I'm about to share. Your blood pressure is not static. It moves throughout the day in a rhythmic cycle that your body has followed since birth. During the day, it rises to meet your activity. At night, during healthy, restorative sleep, it is supposed to drop, somewhere between 10 and 20% below your daytime levels. Cardiologists call this the nocturnal dip, and that dip matters more than most people realize. During those lowered pressure nighttime hours, your arterial walls rest and repair. Inflammation cools down. Your heart doesn't have to push against as much resistance. Your kidneys and blood vessels get a window of recovery they cannot get any other time. When that nighttime dip doesn't happen, when your pressure stays high while you're lying in bed trying to sleep, cardiovascular medicine calls that being a non-dipper. And the research on non-dippers is stark. They carry a significantly higher risk of stroke, heart attack, and heart failure than people whose blood pressure dips appropriately at night. Not a slightly elevated risk, meaningfully higher. And certain drinks consumed in the hours before sleep can turn you from a dipper into a non-dipper by morning. That is what this video is about. Here are the 7 drinks you should never have before bed, and the clinical reasons why. Number 7. Sports drinks and electrolyte beverages. The healthy hydration trap. Let me tell you about Bob, 71 years old, retired general contractor from Dallas, Texas. Bob was meticulous about staying hydrated. He had been told by his previous doctor that dehydration was bad for blood pressure, and that advice wasn't wrong. But somewhere along the way, Bob had started interpreting "stay hydrated" as drink Gatorade. Every night, about an hour before bed, he poured himself a large glass of the orange-flavored Gatorade he kept in his refrigerator in Dallas. He was proud of this habit. He thought he was doing something smart and responsible for his cardiovascular health. His morning blood pressure readings were stubbornly high, 154/91, 157/93. His doctor had adjusted his medication. Nothing seemed to stick. When Bob came to my office, I asked him to walk me through his entire evening routine. And when he mentioned the Gatorade, I stopped him right there. Here is what most seniors have never been told about popular sports drinks. A single 20-ounce bottle of a standard sports electrolyte drink can contain anywhere from 270 to 380 milligrams of sodium. And that sodium doesn't vanish when you go to sleep. It enters your bloodstream. Your blood vessels hold on to water to dilute it. More fluid volume in those vessels means more pressure against the arterial walls, and that pressure stays elevated through the night, right through the hours when your body is supposed to be recovering. Bob was adding a significant sodium load to his cardiovascular system at precisely the worst time possible. Beyond the sodium, many of these drinks contain added sugars that trigger a small insulin response. And that metabolic activation is another signal to your body that it is not yet time to rest. Here is what I told Bob. Plain water is the single best thing you can drink before bed if you want to stay hydrated without compromising your nighttime blood pressure. If he wanted something with a bit of electrolyte benefit, a small glass of low-sodium water with a squeeze of fresh lemon, or simply a cup of warm water with nothing added, would hydrate him without loading his bloodstream with sodium at 9 o'clock at night. Bob switched to plain water before bed. He also began checking the sodium content of every beverage in his refrigerator. Within 5 weeks, his morning systolic reading had dropped 9 points. His doctor was so encouraged that they began discussing a future medication reduction. The rule with sports drinks is this. They were engineered for people doing intense physical activity, athletes replacing electrolytes lost through sweat during exercise. They were not designed as an evening beverage for someone about to lie down and be still for 8 hours. If your evening activity level consists of watching television and reading, you do not need a sports drink. You need water. Number 6. Fruit juice. The heart-healthy illusion. Let me tell you about Margaret, 68 years old, retired elementary school teacher from Columbus, Ohio. Margaret was one of those people who had been health-conscious her entire adult life. She read nutrition labels, she walked in the mornings, she ate fruit every single day, and for as long as she could remember, she had ended her evenings with a tall glass of orange juice. She believed, genuinely and without a single doubt, that the vitamin C and the potassium in that orange juice were doing something good for her heart. Her blood pressure, despite 2 medications and a genuinely reasonable lifestyle, remained at 156/90, morning after morning. Her cardiologist was puzzled. I asked Margaret about her evening routine. When she described the orange juice, I explained something that I think every American senior deserves to hear clearly. Fruit juice, even 100% natural, no added sugar fruit juice, is not the same as eating fruit. When you eat a whole orange, the fruit's natural fiber slows the absorption of fructose into your bloodstream. Your blood sugar rises gradually. Your insulin response is modest. When you drink a glass of orange juice, that fiber is gone. You are drinking a concentrated solution of natural sugars that hits your liver and bloodstream quickly and completely. A single 8-ounce glass of orange juice contains nearly 22 grams of sugar, close to what you'd find in a candy bar, without the fiber that would slow it down. Here is the mechanism that matters for blood pressure. When your liver receives a large fructose load, especially at night when your body has slowed its metabolism in preparation for sleep, it processes that sugar through pathways that stimulate the production of uric acid. Elevated uric acid has been shown in research to reduce the availability of nitric oxide in your blood vessels. And nitric oxide is the compound your arteries need to relax and stay dilated. Less nitric oxide means tighter, stiffer arteries. Tighter arteries mean higher pressure, all while you're sleeping. Margaret was genuinely stunned. She replaced her evening orange juice with a small cup of warm chamomile tea sweetened with nothing. She kept eating whole fruit during the day, which is perfectly healthy and even beneficial for blood pressure. Within 6 weeks, her morning blood pressure was 143. 3 months later, it was consistently reading around 136. Her cardiologist was able to begin tapering one of her medications, all from, changing what she poured into a glass at 8 o'clock at night. The rule here is one sentence. If you want the benefits of fruit for your heart, eat the whole fruit during the day. Never use juice as a bedtime beverage. Number 5. Diet soda. The zero-calorie deception. Let me tell you about Carol, 73 years old, a retired bookkeeper from Minneapolis, Minnesota. Carol had been a regular soda drinker for most of her adult life. When she was 65, her doctor told her that sugar was bad for her blood pressure, so she made what she considered a responsible switch. Out went the regular cola. In came the diet version. 0 calories, 0 sugar. She felt virtuous about this change. She had done what she was told. She was being responsible. Her blood pressure remained stubbornly above 150 systolic for 3 years running, on medication. When I reviewed Carol's daily habits, the evening diet soda stood out immediately. And here is what most people, including many doctors who are not specifically focused on this area, have not fully connected. Diet sodas contain artificial sweeteners like aspartame, saccharin, or sucralose. And those sweeteners, even though they contribute 0 calories, are not biologically inert. They are powerful enough to trigger a cephalic phase insulin response, meaning your brain senses sweetness, it anticipates sugar arriving, and it begins preparing the body's metabolic response even before any real sugar has appeared. That insulin response at night, when your body is supposed to be in a calm, low metabolic state, is a signal that keeps your sympathetic nervous system slightly activated. Your blood pressure does not descend the way it should. The nocturnal dip is blunted. And beyond the insulin response, most diet sodas are carbonated, which means they contain carbonic acid. That acidity can irritate the lining of your stomach, triggering low-level cortisol release. And cortisol, as we know, is one of the primary hormones responsible for keeping blood pressure elevated. On top of all of this, research from the American Heart Association has shown that consuming more than 2 liters of artificially sweetened beverages per week is associated with a 20% increased risk of atrial fibrillation, an irregular heart rhythm that itself dramatically elevates stroke risk. Carol switched her evening diet soda to sparkling water with a slice of cucumber or a sprig of fresh mint. No sweeteners of any kind. Within 8 weeks, her morning systolic had dropped 8 points. She later told me that she had assumed because it said diet on the label, it was safe for her heart. That assumption had been costing her for 3 years. The rule is straightforward. Diet does not mean heart safe, it simply means no calories. The other chemicals in that can are still affecting your blood pressure, your nervous system, and your cardiac rhythm. Number 4, regular soda and sweetened beverages. The evening sugar flood. Let me tell you about Frank, 66 years old, retired automotive mechanic from Memphis, Tennessee. Frank was the first to admit that he had a Coca-Cola habit going back to his teenage years. He didn't drink coffee, he didn't drink alcohol. But every single evening, right after dinner, and again around 9 o'clock while he watched the news, Frank had a cold can of regular Coke. It was, he said, the one pleasure he refused to give up. He had given up fried food. He had given up red meat 3 times a week. He had given up adding salt at the table. He was drawing the line at his evening Coke. His blood pressure was 161/95 on 2 medications. Let me explain what that single can of regular soda is doing to Frank's cardiovascular system at 9 o'clock at night. A standard 12-ounce can of Coca-Cola contains approximately 39 grams of added sugar. That is nearly 10 teaspoons of sugar hitting his bloodstream in one sitting. When blood sugar rises sharply, insulin spikes to manage it. Insulin signals the kidneys to retain sodium. Retained sodium means retained fluid volume. More fluid in the blood vessels means more pressure on the arterial walls. This entire process plays out while Frank is sitting still, about to go to bed, and it doesn't resolve by morning. But there is a second mechanism that is equally important and almost never discussed in popular health content. High sugar intake at night increases uric acid production and simultaneously reduces the kidney's ability to excrete excess sodium efficiently overnight. Your body's natural ability to flush out sodium, which normally happens partly while you sleep, is compromised by the sugar load. So the sodium that was already in Frank's dinner is now being retained even more effectively than it would have been otherwise. Research published in peer-reviewed cardiovascular journals has found that a single daily serving of a sugar-sweetened beverage is associated with a 2-point rise in systolic blood pressure over time. That may sound modest, but for someone already managing hypertension, 2 points is the difference between being in control and being out of control. I told Frank the truth, the way I always do with patients who have a habit they're attached to. I said, I understand this is something you enjoy. I'm not going to pretend the emotional side of this doesn't matter, but this habit is working directly against your blood pressure medications. The Coke is partially undoing the work the pills are trying to do. He was quiet for a moment. Then he asked what he could drink instead. Frank switched to sparkling water with a squeeze of fresh lime, served ice cold, which, he later admitted, gave him some of the same satisfaction as the Coke without the biochemical sabotage. 8 weeks later, his morning blood pressure was 147. His doctor was encouraged for the first time in years. Number 3, caffeinated tea, the sneaky stimulant hidden in tradition. Let me tell you about Helen. 70 years old, retired hospital administrator from Charleston, South Carolina. Helen was a tea drinker her whole life, had been since childhood, as most people in her part of the country are. She didn't think of tea as a caffeinated beverage. Tea was warm and soothing and something she associated with slowing down, relaxing, and getting ready for sleep. Every evening at around 8:30, she brewed herself a large mug of black tea. Sweet tea was her tradition. Her cardiologist had been puzzled for months. Her numbers during daytime appointments were manageable, but her morning home readings, which she dutifully logged and brought to every visit, were consistently high, 150 to 158 systolic, even on her current medication regimen. Here is what Helen didn't know about her evening tea habit. An 8-ounce cup of black tea contains between 40 and 70 milligrams of caffeine. That's not as much as coffee, but it's not nothing, especially for a 70-year-old whose body processes caffeine more slowly than it did at 40. When you consume caffeine, it blocks adenosine receptors in your brain. Adenosine is the compound that builds up throughout the day and signals your body that it is time to sleep, time to let your nervous system downshift. When caffeine blocks those receptors, your brain doesn't receive that sleep signal properly. Your sympathetic nervous system, the branch responsible for the fight-or-flight response and elevated blood pressure, stays partially activated. Caffeine can raise systolic blood pressure by as much as 8 to 10 points within 30 to 60 minutes of consumption, according to research from the Cleveland Clinic. And while regular caffeine users develop some tolerance over time, older adults metabolize caffeine significantly more slowly than younger people. For someone at 70, the caffeine from an 8:30 p.m. cup of black tea may still be actively circulating in the bloodstream well past midnight, directly interfering with the nocturnal blood pressure dip. Beyond the caffeine itself, Helen's sweet tea contained sugar. All the same blood sugar and insulin dynamics I described with Frank and Carol were playing out simultaneously in Helen's body. The combination, caffeine blocking the sleep signal and sugar spiking insulin, was keeping her cardiovascular system in a partially alert, elevated pressure state for hours after she climbed into bed. Helen switched her evening tea to caffeine-free chamomile. No sweetener, just the flower steeped in hot water. Within 3 weeks, her morning readings had dropped an average of 7 points. Within 2 months, she was seeing consistent readings in the low 140s, the most stable her blood pressure had been in 4 years. She told me she had never, in all her years, thought of tea as something that could be hurting her. The rule here is non-negotiable for anyone over 60 managing blood pressure. No caffeinated beverages of any kind after 2 p.m. Not coffee, not black tea, not green tea, not caffeinated herbal blends. The caffeine half-life in an older adult can be 6 to 8 hours. What you drink in the afternoon is still in your nervous system at bedtime. Number 2. Hot cocoa mixes and sweetened warm drinks, the comfort trap. Let me tell you about Philip, 74 years old, retired civil engineer from Denver, Colorado. Philip had developed a bedtime ritual after his wife of 45 years passed away. Every night at 9 o'clock, he made himself a mug of hot cocoa using one of those powdered packets that you pour into hot water and stir. He found it comforting. It felt like a hug in a mug. His words. It helped him feel less alone in his Denver home during those quiet hours before sleep. He didn't think of it as, something medical. It was emotional. It was routine. It was his way of ending the day. His blood pressure had been rising gradually over 2 years. 142, then 149, then 155. Now, on 2 medications, it was holding at 151/89, not where anyone wanted it. Here is what is inside a standard commercial hot cocoa mix packet. 1 serving typically contains 15 to 25 grams of added sugar. Several contain partially hydrogenated oils. And here is the part that almost no one talks about. Cocoa, even in small amounts, contains both caffeine and a compound called theobromine. Theobromine is a mild stimulant in the methylxanthine family, the same chemical class as caffeine. While its stimulant effect is gentler than caffeine's, it has a longer duration of action. Theobromine can remain active in the body for 6 to 10 hours after consumption. When Philip drank his hot cocoa at 9 p.m., he was introducing a mild but real stimulant into his system at the exact moment his body needed to begin downshifting its nervous system activity. Combined with the sugar spike and the subsequent insulin response, His bedtime ritual was gently preventing his blood pressure from descending into the healthy nighttime dip zone. I want to be careful here, because I know what hot cocoa meant to Philip emotionally. The comfort of a warm drink before bed is real and legitimate. The need for ritual and warmth, especially in grief, is something that deserves respect, not dismissal. So I didn't tell Philip to simply stop. I told him what to switch to. Warm milk, low-fat dairy, heated gently on the stove, maybe with just the smallest pinch of pure cinnamon. No cocoa powder, no sugar packets, no mix, just warm milk. Dairy contains calcium, which plays a direct role in regulating vascular smooth muscle tone. Warm milk consumed before bed has been associated in research with modest reductions in nighttime blood pressure and improved sleep quality. It gave Philip the warmth, the ritual, and the emotional comfort he needed, without the stimulants and the sugar sabotaging his arteries overnight. 6 weeks after the switch, Philip's morning blood pressure was 142. 10 weeks later, it was 135. Not because we changed his medications, because we changed what he poured into a mug at 9 o'clock. The rule here is this: warm beverages before bed are not automatically safe or beneficial just because they feel soothing. Check the ingredients in your packets and mixes. Added sugars, cocoa-derived stimulants, and artificial flavor compounds can all interfere with the nighttime cardiovascular recovery cycle your heart depends on. If you want a warm bedtime drink that actually supports your blood pressure, warm low-fat milk or unsweetened caffeine-free herbal tea, chamomile, passion flower, or valerian are your best options. Number 1, alcohol, including wine, the nightcap myth that is damaging your heart. I have saved number 1 for last, not because it is the most obvious, but because it is the most misunderstood, and because the number of patients I have seen over 23 years in cardiology who are unknowingly damaging their overnight blood pressure with this one habit, believing with complete sincerity that it is harmless or even beneficial, is honestly heartbreaking. Let me tell you about Dorothy, 69 years old, retired school librarian from St. Louis, Missouri. Dorothy was careful about her health. She ate sensibly, she walked every morning, she took her blood pressure medication without fail. She was, by every visible measure, doing the responsible thing. And every single evening, she poured herself a single glass of red wine. 1 glass. She was adamant about that. Not 2, not 3, just 1. She had read years ago that red wine contained something called resveratrol, that a glass of wine was good for the heart. Her own father, she told me, had lived to 91 and always had a glass of wine with dinner. She felt completely justified, completely confident, that her nightly glass was either neutral or gently beneficial to her cardiovascular health. Her blood pressure was 158/94. Her cardiologist had tried 3 different medication combinations over 4 years. Nothing produced lasting, stable control. Dorothy was frustrated and genuinely confused. She was, by her understanding, doing everything right. Closing, what to do. Starting tonight. What to do. What can you drink before bed? Let me give you the same list I give my patients. Plain water is always first. Warm low-fat milk or a small amount of tart cherry juice, which actually contains natural melatonin and has been studied for modest blood pressure support, are reasonable options. Caffeine-free herbal teas like chamomile, valerian root, or passion flower are genuinely beneficial, and chamomile in particular has been studied for its blood vessel relaxing and mild anti-inflammatory properties. A small glass of warm water with a thin slice of fresh lemon. Any of these options gives your body hydration and comfort without the hormonal disruption, the sodium load, the sugar spike, or the stimulant activation that makes your heart work harder while you sleep. Here's what I need you to understand above everything else. The damage that these 7 drinks do to your overnight blood pressure does not announce itself loudly. It doesn't give you a headache or a racing heart or any other obvious signal. It happens quietly, invisibly, while you sleep, while you're completely unaware that your arteries are under pressure that they should not be under. And then it shows up the next morning as a number on your blood pressure cuff that confuses and frightens you, that leads to medication adjustments, that leads to frustration, that leads to the feeling that your blood pressure is just something your body does and nothing you do makes a difference. And that is not true. What you drink matters. The hour at which you drink it matters. The way it interacts with the biochemistry of sleep matters enormously. Dorothy, Philip, Helen, Frank, Carol, Margaret, and Bob All of them learned this. None of them had been told by anyone. None of them had any reason to suspect that a glass of orange juice or a can of soda or a cup of sweet tea or a single glass of wine was silently working against their heart while they slept. Knowledge, in medicine is not optional. It is the intervention. What you know changes what you do. What you do changes what happens inside your body every single night. If this video gave you something real today, if it clarified something that no one in a doctor's office has ever explained to you clearly, please share it with someone you love. Share it with a neighbor who checks their blood pressure every morning and can't figure out why the numbers won't behave. Share it with a sibling who has a nightly wine habit they've always believed was harmless. Share it with a parent who ends every evening with a large glass of juice thinking it's doing their heart good. This information belongs to all of them. It doesn't cost anything to pass it along. And if you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, please do it right now. Every week, I bring you the kind of direct, evidence-based, plainly stated medical truth that you deserve to hear. No marketing, no supplements to sell, just the real information about your body and your health delivered as clearly as I know how. Take good care of yourself tonight. Start with what's in your glass, and I will see you in the next video.